The floor is floated over the top of the tracks that we used in the rope making process. So if anyone ever wanted to turn it back into a working rope walk, they could take the floor up and the tracks are there underneath.
You're listening to Come Here, the podcast for and about heritage attractions, where you can discover somewhere worth visiting. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist with a background in archaeology, specialising in voiceover for the heritage sector. Each week, I chat to someone from a different museum, historic site, gallery or cultural space about why you should visit, and exactly what you can expect when you get there. Liz Bennet is the Managing Director at the Ropewalk Arts Centre in Barton upon Humber in North Lincolnshire. The Ropewalk itself is a very unusual building with a wonderful history that's well worth exploring. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, Liz.
Oh, you're welcome, Liz.
Now, I know you wear lots of hats and do lots of things, but today we're talking about the Ropewalk in Barton. First of all, tell us about the Ropewalk. What is it?
Well, the Ropewalk itself is a 1/4 mile long building that is part of a former rope factory that was based on the site, and it's the last remaining part of that rope factory. The factory itself closed in 1989, and then the site was cleared in 1999 to make room for a housing development, but also for a supermarket. But the Ropewalk itself, because it's Grade 2 listed, was sort of sat there derelict without any purpose, I suppose. And so today, after quite a lot of work, it's now an art centre and sort of preserved for posterity, I suppose. And a well-loved one, I'd like to think. Well, people tell me that.
Yeah.
I'm obviously very biased.
How long was it empty for?
It was about 10 years, so it closed its doors in 1989, and then Proudfoot Supermarket bought the site in 1996, and I'll use the wrong way, we walked into it in August 1999 and took a lease on from there. So it was 10 years with it just being empty.
Yeah, so what did it look like at that point?
Well, this is why we sometimes think we're stupid when we look back, but we were young, naive and enthusiastic when we took the building on. It was just a derelict brick shed. It's only 30 foot wide, so it's sort of just long and narrow. It was beautiful when the sun shone because there was that many holes in the roof that it was like a light show inside. And you could walk down to the middle of it, I remember, and if you looked back either way, you couldn't see the end of it from inside.
Yeah.
It was quite spectacular before we sectioned it up, but obviously just a long empty shed wasn't viable for any to be used as it was. I did have the idea of making one of the longest bars in Britain. I thought that would be fantastic, but that one didn't take hold. So we turned it into an art centre.
Yeah, so did you know straight away that that's what you wanted to do with it? How did you just decide what was going to be in there?
Well, sort of moving back to about 1996, myself and my partner Richard and a friend Tim Needham, we were looking for studio space in Barton. I'd been getting in touch with estate agents, and we'd taken on empty shops and basically gone in and white-walled them and done a different project, whether it was a camera obscura or an exhibition. And every time we did something, the shop either let or sold. So, instead of me chasing estate agents, they were coming to me and saying, do you want to use it? We've got this empty shop. And we got in the ridiculous position that there was no empty shops left. It was part of the regeneration time then in the late 90s. And so we went to look at the Ropewalk as a bit of a joke, really. And then went for a meeting in the pub afterwards. And Tim and Richard said, if you can raise the money, we'll do it. So, yeah, we kind of knew we wanted artist studios and a little gallery, but we didn't really think that we wanted 1/4 mile of it. But so we took it on in August 1999. We formed as a workers' cooperative, and then opened to the public 1/5 of the building in April April 2000. So it wasn't long between taking it on and opening that first fifth. It then took us another 3 or 4 years to raise enough funds to finish the whole of the building, the other 4/5, and that sort of evolved because as soon as we had 4 studios initially, we just had so many inquiries. We thought, you know what, I think this is a goer.
Yeah.
And we've got 23 units now within the building that are all full. And things like we've got 2 meeting rooms, which wasn't on our radar at all, but they've been a good source of income and a good thing to have. And we have space for workshops, an art room, and then Ropery Hall sort of evolved as our performance space. I'd been putting lots of shows on at different venues in Barton and previously promoted comedy and jazz. So it was it just seemed to fall into place that we'd have a performance space there as well. And that really sort of took off. It started as a community thing, just a bit of film, a few shows a month, and now it's sort of 4 or 5 nights a week. So
Yeah.
Broad for our own back, yes.
And there are parts of the old mechanism, the rope making mechanism left in the building, aren't there? Tell us about that.
Yeah, we tried to keep as much as we could. There wasn't even a piece of rope in the building. As I say to people when I do guided tours, in 1986 the factory was bought out by a competitor and asset stripped and closed in 89. So there wasn't even a piece of rope. There was very little. Anything that could be sold had been sold or broken up for scrap. So there's not a lot left there, but there are remnants you can see. Some of the posts, which was a bit of a fight between the fire officer and English Heritage, and English Heritage won. So we have these posts that stick up all over the place. One of them's in a gents' toilet in one part of the building. You know, they're just sort of big wooden posts that we use as part of the rope making process. And we also sympathetically, not that I think it'll ever be used, but the floor is floated over the top of the tracks that we used in the rope making process. So if anyone ever wanted to turn it back into a working rope walk, they could take the floor up and the tracks are there underneath. So yes, it would be usable again.
Yeah. And I think your roof's quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I haven't checked lately to see if we've ever been usurped, but it's always was the longest single span pan-tile roof in Europe. That was our claim to fame. There's other rope walks in the country like Chatham Docks in Kent, but they're on a few levels, so they're not as long as we are. But yeah, it is a very, very long building.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about the history of rope making in Barton then and the building itself.
Well, the parcel of land that it sits on was purchased in 1801. We've got a copy of the deeds, and that was the Halls family from Hull. They're a shipping family and made their money in whaling and decided that they would have their own make their own rope rather than purchasing it. And as it is today, land on the south bank of the Humber is cheaper than on the north bank. So they purchased the site, which is ideal because it's flat, long, and running along the side of it is the natural tidal inlet, the Barton Haven. So they were able to use that to bring the raw materials on by barge from Hull up the Haven and unload it and then send ropes back out on barge to Hull and then export through their shipping companies. So Hallmark ropes circled the globe really. They had massive orders for South America and Canada, Nova Scotia, all around that area. The raw materials came from Russia for the hemp and France, and then sisal from East Africa and Manila from the Philippines. So it was a global industry just here in our little market town.
Yeah, and being that close to the haven, was it at risk from flooding?
Yes, and it did flood fairly regularly. And again, another thing I always point out when people are walking round, there are some boarded up sections at ground floor level along the length of the building. Some have been bricked up, some are boarded. So these were square holes about 2 foot square, and they were open. And evidently, if the haven overtopped, the water would just come through on the west side, through to the east side, and just drain through, and the building stayed standing. So very, very primitive, but incredibly effective. When we took the building on, I talked to a lot of the people who worked there, and they said when it overtopped and they got floods, they'd come in the next day and just go to the field opposite, which is now a housing estate, and find their tools, wash the mud off them, and then go back to work. So, you know, job done. Building still standing.
It must have been a pretty drafty place to work then, I should think.
Yeah, The only source of heating were sort of oil drums, and the roof, as I've mentioned before, wasn't in a brilliant state of repair. One chap told me that when it snowed, again it would snow in, so it would be on your workbench. You'd have to dust it off before you could start working. So no, they weren't brilliant working conditions, but it was, for all, a really popular place to work, and lots of families worked there. So if you left school and your auntie or your uncle worked there, or your brother, then you'd follow on. So you got choice of employment in Barton, because there was in 1900 there was 11 brick and tile yards along the bank.
Wow.
Then of course you've got the rope factory, and then also Hopper Cycle, which in its height employed about 700 people. That closed in the late 60s. So there was 3 big employers in town, on top of things like agriculture. There was a foundry, a whiting mill, cement works. So you'd got a lot of industry in a small market town. So I think there's remnants of it all over Barton. Oh, there was a brewery as well. I've forgotten Anchor Brewery. So, you walk round and the evidence is all there, but Barton's almost like a museum piece in itself. You can walk around and spot buildings and think, I wonder what that was, and then you realise. And there's a good town guide that the Civic Society produce that has all these sort of nuggets in. It's only £3, so it's well worth the purchase, and it tells you about the history of all the buildings.
Absolutely.
And where the factories were sited and things.
Yeah. So tell us about what's in the building today. What can people expect if they come and visit?
Well, we've got 4 galleries, and we have changing exhibitions every 6 to 8 weeks. We try to change them at different times, so there's usually, if you came once a month, there'd always be something different. There's a craft gallery which houses work from 200 makers from around the country. We select on quality, try not to have too many things the same. And so there's textiles, ceramics, jewellery, I'm trying to think what else, woodwork, all sorts, good selection of cards, art cards. And then there's a small heritage display, which is, we're an accredited museum, so it's got the history of the factory, but also of details of the rope making process. So, if you want to know how to make a rope, it's all there. Then we have a wonderful coffee shop. Everything's in-house, so any profit generated by our catering goes into keeping the building keep it going. Then that's the bit that's really open to the public. The rest of the building is workspace, as I said, it's artist studios. So that's open in September every year for one weekend. So all the artists come in and are working, so you can go in and see what they're doing and have a look. And that's always a really good chance to have a look around the whole building. And then at the north end of the building, we've got Ropery Hall, where we have all the shows, films and performances. So we've got theatre on tonight, and it's music over the weekend, and most weeks the same like that. We've got a good, healthy programme of events. So
how often are you open, and what hours are you open?
We open Tuesday to Sunday, and it's 10 till 5, Tuesday to Saturday, and on Sunday we just close an hour earlier at 4 o'clock.
And how long should people allow for a visit?
I would say if you're going to have something to eat, or a coffee at least, probably a couple of hours. The thing that's well worth considering is there's a full day if you stay in Barton. There's so much to do, and as like I say, pick up a town trail, have a look, but also there's the Wilderspin School Museum, and lots of different things to look at. If you come on a Sunday, there's a Ted Lewis Museum as well. So we're blessed with things on the doorstep. If you like natural history, you've got Farring's Nature Reserve to go to, loads of walks along the Humber bank, and the Water's Edge Visitor Centre there as well. So yeah, Barton itself is, you could certainly spend a day here and probably want some more time. But the Ropewalk itself, I would say 2 hours.
Yeah. And you mentioned guided tours earlier on. Is that something you do a lot of?
Do quite a lot, sort of WIs, different groups. I do it makes me feel old, but I do a talk every year for John Leggett college students who are doing about regeneration and different uses of buildings. It's part of their geography course. And I had someone work for me doing as a sound technician last weekend, and he said, I came on that in 2010 when I was, and I was thinking, have I been doing it that long, But yes, people, if there's more than sort of a party of 6 or 8, they can book to have a tour, and I'm always quite happy to take people around. We are involved in Heritage Open Days every year in September, and I usually bung a couple of tours on there. I always think everybody must have done it already, but we always sort of get people signing up for that. It's free, and they can have a wander around. I do a presentation and then just answer questions really and point things out.
Yeah. So tell me about some of the exhibitions that you've got coming up this year.
Well, we're in the process of changeover at the moment. So the next exhibition's open this Saturday. In one gallery, it's an exhibition by the Sheffield Printmaking Group. So they're quite a well-established printmaking group. So printmaking is one of my favourite mediums because it's usually quite accessible price-wise, and it's a good way to start your art collection. And for like me that's got too much, I can always justify a lino cut here, there or everywhere. And so they're in the Art Space gallery, and then in Gallery 1 we've got Chris Brook, who has is a solo show, and again it's sort of some abstract work, and it's very quite decorative, and I'm sure people will enjoy looking at the colours, and so those are the ones that are coming up next. And then we've got our very popular Humber to the Wash exhibition this summer, which is an open exhibition that anyone can enter, and it's selected. We always get guest selectors, so it's not just us choosing the work. It's a different set of eyes, and that runs through the summer, and we usually have about 350 pieces of work there for people to see. And it's because it's an open exhibition, there's something for everybody. It caters for all tastes, really, I think.
And you always have a really good Christmas market, don't you?
Oh, we do, yes. That's always the first weekend in December, and we have over 50 makers come along to that and have stalls all the length of the corridor, and our studio artists are open as well. And it is a really buzzing, sort of exciting event, and you can always pick something up. You go down. I always go down thinking I'm going to buy presents for people, and I end up buying things for myself. So it's just we have outdoor events as well during the year. The two that standout ones are our gardening day. This year it's on the 17th of May. It's the third Sunday of the month, and that's outside. We get nurseries and growers to come along and set their stalls up and sell plants direct to the public, and there's usually about 30 stalls there, and we do get several thousand people come to that.
Wow.
It's always really busy, and again it's just wonderful to see people sort of walking off looking like human trees because they're trying to carry massive plants away. And then we have a classic car day at the end of June, the last Sunday in June. I think that's the 28th it'll be this year, and that is just a collection of about 100 vintage cars, classic cars that are lined up outside, and they look really good against the building.
Yeah.
The first year we did that, I was left in charge of parking, and I tried to arrange them in colour, which evidently isn't done, and not being someone that has anything usually to do with classic cars, I didn't realise that. So I did get told off for that one, but it looked fantastic. They wouldn't let me do it again, so the next year someone else did it and did them more in like different types of car.
Yeah.
But I liked my idea better, and it looked good.
So how accessible is the site for visitors who've got mobility issues?
Yeah, it's all ground floor, so there is no apart from a little lip as you come into the craft gallery, but we've got a small ramp there. It's fine, and we have accessible toilets throughout the building as well.
Yeah. And is it family friendly? What is there for children?
This is a difficult one. I'm going to say no, not really. I mean, we love to see young people, but there isn't anything really to entertain them. So if people ring us up and say, we're going to bring the grandchildren, I'm saying, well, there's great things for them to eat, and if they're interested, there's sometimes an activity table, but not always. But Water's Edge, which is just down the promenade from us, a nice walk, and they've got loads of kids' activities. They've got a playground area as well. So if you combine it with other things,
yes,
then it's that trade-off. I always remember when my son was young, we went to Paris once, and the trade-off was he wanted to go up the Eiffel Tower, so we did that in the morning, and then we went to the Louvre in the afternoon. So it was like boat ride on the Seine one morning and off to Museum d'Orsay in the afternoon. So you just that compromise thing, isn't it? So yes, we haven't got a lot of activities for children, although we're working on that for our new venture at Baysgarth. That's going to have a lot more things for the family.
Yeah. And that's something we're going to talk about in another episode.
Absolutely.
And I think you're not dog friendly, are you?
No, we are. All the staff love dogs, but we
Yes,
don't.
but, yeah.
It's assistance dogs only in the
Yes.
building, and that isn't going to change. And to be fair, a lot of customers are happy that that's the case.
Yeah.
So up at Baysgath, our new venture, that is dog friendly. So we're doing both.
Yes.
So but Ropewalk, no, I'm afraid. You can take your dog for a walk along the bank, exhaust them, and then and pop in and have a look yourself. But I'm sorry, you can't bring your dog in.
Yeah. So tell me about looking after a building like the Ropewalk. It's it's quite an old building. Is there lots of maintenance to do?
There's always bits dropping off, yes. We have a volunteer maintenance team, and they are brilliant, all retired but with different skill sets. And they come in on a Monday. So Mondays is maintenance day and accounts day. On the day we're shut, that's when we do the deep cleaning and all the rest of it. But yeah, there is, and we desperately need to raise some funds to do more work. But at the moment, it's just like everybody else. It's a struggle. So, but we do manage to keep it going.
Yeah. So what kinds of plans have you got for the Ropewalk? Are there any developments coming up there?
Yeah, well, we got planning permission 2 years ago to put solar panels on a section of the roof, and we didn't want to have sort of black standard solar panels, and we've managed to source some red Pantile red ones, and also because there's no insulation in the south end of the building, the idea is that we'll actually raise the roof slightly, insulate it, and then the solar panels will be inset into the tiles, so they won't be very obvious.
Yeah.
And so that whole scheme that we've had done included harvesting rainwater to for toilet flushing, what have you, grey water, and also we've got a very hot kitchen and then areas that are very cold, so a heat transfer system with filters. So we've got all the plans for that. We've had the planning permission. It's just the little thing of raising 220,000 now to do it. But if we can't, I've applied for some grants and been knocked back, but I keep applying. And if we can't manage to get grants for all of it, then we will look at sort of some of the finance things that are out there, because I think as energy prices continue to rise, it probably will pay for itself over a number of years. So I think that's something we're considering at the moment. Yeah.
So since you've been working at the Ropewalk, what's your most memorable moment, or have you discovered anything unexpected about the building?
Don't think, and nothing really unexpected, because the building itself is it's a straightforward building. I love it because it's bricks, and I love a lot of bricks. And it's very, well, it was a factory. It's very functional. Some people might think it's ugly, but no, it's I think the thing that we've discovered about it is the stories from the people who work there. That has been one of the, a real pleasure to, and in the early days we recorded a lot of them and developed a book, but to find out, sort of those different stories of people who had worked there and enjoyed working there and with their families, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed the most about it. And I do actually just love the building itself. It breathes. People go, what's that noise? It's just the roof moving. In the Pantile roofs are lovely. They seem to have their own life. They as if it's windy, they sort of lift and drop and they sigh. And sometimes I know how they feel. Yes.
So why do you think that the site matters? What's important about it? Why is it important to preserve it for the future?
I think it's just the sheer scale of it. To have a building that size, you wouldn't have one these days for anything in particular, I don't think. And just the situation, you just walk down it and you see the Humber Bridge behind it, so it's really well situated. But also the fact that, we get 100,000 visitors a year. People value it. It's part of the community. They enjoy coming to see a film there, or having some food there, or seeing an exhibition and meet friends there. It just, the 26 years that we've been open, it has become part of the life of the town, but also of the wider region, I think. And I think that's why it really is important, because it's kind of special to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, special to Barton, for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being my guest. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be recording a future episode about Baysgarth House Museum later in the year. So, listen out for that, everybody. Thank you very much for being my guest, Liz.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Liz.
Thanks for listening to Come Here. If you know a heritage attraction that would love to be featured, or you have a suggestion for somewhere you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. To find my email address and find out more about me, pop to my website at lizdrury.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, rate and review the show. It really helps other people to find it. See you next time, and come and discover somewhere else worth visiting.